All right, shut up, you guys. I want to talk about Wonka. Okay, this hat's ridiculous. I'm not gonna do the full thing wearing that hat. So, over the holiday break, I saw the new Willy Wonka origin film, Wonka, in theaters. And then the next night, I happened to see the original 1971 film, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, on TV. And then the next night, I actually saw the 2005 Tim Burton film, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, on TV. That's not going to come into what I want to talk about, but I just wanted you all to know that I went through that. So I am pretty deep in the Wonka universe at this point. I am lost in the chocolate sauce, one might say. And I can't stop thinking about the more subtle ways in which these films connect. Because for the most part, I think this new film does a really good job of keeping the universe consistent throughout both films. But since the very first publicity material came out for Wonka, people have commented on the kind of tonal dissonance between them. In the original, it's very edgy and kind of creepy, especially for a children's movie, and especially within the character of Willy Wonka himself. And this new prequel has a very optimistic and innocent version of the character of Wonka. And I'm still not really sure how one of these Wonkas becomes the other, but I do think there are a lot of details that people are not talking about that actually make the original even darker. That's right, I think that Timothee Chalamet's Little Baby Wonka makes the Gene Wilder version even worse. So before I break it down, disclaimer, I did not read the original Roald Dahl novels, not because I'm lazy, but because I feel that Wonka has marketed itself, that's hard to say. Wonka has marketed itself as a direct prequel to the 1971 movie. So I do not feel that the book or any other supplementary material is relevant. So don't come at me if I'm missing any details that come up there, or I'm not your mom. Point 1, the fine print. In Wonka, one of the first things that happens to our fresh-faced hero, as played by is he's invited to stay at this cheap inn, and he's made to sign this contract full of tiny little print, and he does sign it because our little baby boy can't read. And the next day he finds out he's actually agreed to pay off this huge list of extra fees by essentially becoming an indentured servant. So of course this act of tricking someone into signing a legally binding contract that he doesn't have the proper opportunity to look over or understand is seen by Timmy and by the film itself as a totally underhanded and deeply immoral behavior. So do y'all remember what the first thing Willy Wonka has the golden ticket holders do when they enter the factory? Yes, he has them sign an entire wall full of legalese text, much of which is too small for them to possibly read, with no time to look it over, or God forbid, consult legal counsel. So this guy took one of the most underhanded things anyone had ever done to him, and he thought, I'm gonna use that one. Now, obviously, some of the stipulations we see from Wonka's contract are a lot more reasonable than that of Mrs. Scrubbits, the innkeeper. For example, we know that if the children break any of Wonka's rules, i.e. when Charlie steals a sip of the fizzy lifting drink, they forfeit their prize. That makes sense. Children are terrible. I do a lot of work with children. I love children. Children are the future. But we have no idea what else was in these contracts. I mean, I'm sure it absolved him from any responsibilities if someone drowned in a chocolate river or was pecked to death by a goose. And I mean, when else in his long and mysterious career might have Wonka used these sneaky contracts? Point number 2, the Oompa Loompas. In Wonka, another thing that is left up to our imagination, or perhaps to the inevitable sequel, Wonka 2 Even Wonkier, is how Wonka ends up with a whole little army of Oompa Loompas running his factory. Because at the end of the movie, he just has one, Hugh Grant's Lofty, who is somewhat of an outsider in the Oompa Loompa community. Oompa Loompa community, that's another hard one. In Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Wonka states that the Oompa Loompas came to work for him to get away from the various predators that would eat them in Oompa Loompa land. But the thing is, in Wonka, we see the native Oompa Loompa land in flashbacks, and we don't see any predators. Lofty tells us that the climate is bad and makes agriculture difficult, but not only do we not see any actual dangerous animals, but the land is apparently safe enough that they leave one of their most precious resources, the cocoa bean, in the watch of just one guard. And not a good guard. Another thing that we learn about Oompa Loompas in Wonka is that they view debts as incredibly important. When Lofty lets the cocoa beans get stolen, they tell him he has to return that debt thousandfold or never return. So keep in mind, that's the kind of agreement that they view as reasonable. Either that or they just wanted to get rid of Lofty. So did Willy Wonka really graciously allow the Oompa Loompas to move in and work for him to escape danger? Or is it possible that when he had to let go of his regular workforce for reasons, he managed to manipulate these guys into working for him? Hold some clause or catch-22 over their head the same way that Scrubbit did to him and his buddies. The difference being, of course, that unlike our wily Wonka, the Oompa Loompas would have too much honor to try and escape a debt that they stumbled into. That is so messed up, you might say. There's a difference between making kids sign a piece of paper saying they're not going to break your stuff and tricking a truckload of orange people into a lifetime of servitude. What could possibly make Willy Wonka so twisted or so disillusioned with humanity that he would be willing to play this dirty? Perhaps the betrayal of a friend. Part 3, Slugworth. You'll recall in the original, Slugworth is Wonka's main rival, and they're known for constantly trying to steal all of Wonka's trade secrets. That's the reason they originally have to shut down the factory and fire all of the employees, because he can't trust anyone not to sell all of his ideas and recipes to Slugworth. We see the children approached by someone who we're led to believe is Slugworth, but actually he's just a man who works for Wonka, who was sent out to see if they are trustworthy. In Wonka, we do meet Arthur Slugworth, one of the 3 members of the chocolate cartel that make it their mission to get our little Willy out of the picture by any means necessary. Of course, by the end of the film, our hero has bested them, they go to jail, and their reputation and chocolate have both gone down the drain. Or up the drain, because it's like a fountain. That's where all the chocolate goes, is a fountain. So how is it that by the time the original rolls around, Slugworth's chocolate company seems to be a strong and legitimate competitor to the Wonka brand? Did Slugworth manage to get out of jail, rebuild his company, and somehow make the world forget that he tried to corrupt the entire police force and murder several people? I guess you can't entirely put that past a millionaire CEO these days. Or is the company now run by some faceless board who just used the Slugworth name for recognition? Or is there an heir to the Slugworth legacy? Maybe someone who had a crash course in chocolate making from the very best? That's right. Noodle. Noodle, if you haven't seen the film, is Wonka's little sarcastic orphan child friend who has similarly been tricked into a life of servitude by Scrubbit. And at the end of the film, you discover that she is the niece of Arthur Slugworth, who has been trying to erase her existence so there are no other contenders for the Slugworth estate. So when Arthur Slugworth goes to jail, it seems like her name should at least be in the mix for who now has control of the company. So let's say that Noodle does take control of the Slugworth company. Would she really betray her friend, Timothee, try to steal all his secrets? That's not the Noodle we know. But here's the thing. Noodle is a good person, but an incredibly jaded and pessimistic one. When she tries chocolate for the first time, her first thought is that she wishes that she hadn't because now every day without chocolate will be worse. And honestly, she has her reasons for being a glass half empty kind of gal. I mean, she's been abused and neglected by the closest thing she has to parents. Everyone else she knows is too busy being scared for their own well-being to stick up for her. And when she finally finds an adult who tries to make her life better, she ends up almost being murdered by 3 other adults. And sure, it all works out in the end. She's reunited with her mother, but if she were put in a high-stress, high-stakes situation, if any of her happy endings started to fall apart, if she had the right people whispering in her ear, would it be so hard to convince her that the nice man that she knew for a few weeks maybe didn't have her best intentions at heart? So a cycle of mistrust and betrayal begins. Noodle distrusts Willy, tries to learn more about his creations. Willy distrusts Noodle, and thus the world closes the factory to the public, enslaves the Oompa Loompas. This just confirms Noodle's belief that Willy is a shady guy. More spying and subterfuge till they're both just weird little chocolate-making recluses. It kind of makes you wonder what ends up happening with Charlie, another poor kid who had a rough start in life and then comes into a big chocolate-related fortune, and then you get no follow-up on it. The movie just ends with him going up in that glass elevator. At least in the Tim Burton version, there's some dentist-related shenanigans, and then you see them living happily ever after. So that concludes my thoughts on Wonka, the new family flick that shines a dark shadow on the already pretty spicy classic kids movie that we all love to watch when it comes on at Easter or whatever. Maybe more will be uncovered with some kind of in-between-quel. Or maybe we'll learn what happens to Charlie when someone finally adapts the book's sequel, Charlie and the Glass Elevator. I wonder what happens in that. They go to space and then give Charlie's grandparents de-aging potions and turn them into toddlers. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Maybe I missed something. Maybe you think I'm way off base when it comes to the nature of humanity or Oompa Loompa cultures. Maybe you just can't wait to see the sequel where they gotta go get Grandma Georgina in Minus Land because they accidentally made her minus 2 years old. Either way, thanks for watching and have a delicious day.